Step by step, from scratch, we are going to see how to create an inventory management in Excel fully automated with formulas. And we also are going to have a second sheet where we can register all the inflows and outflows to all the items that we have, purchases and sales. And the way the stock, the inventory management can works properly with information such as, first, we can register all the items that we have. So I can go here to the blank cell and register a new item if I want to. New item, and then enter. Excel is going to automatically insert a new row with all the formulas that we did. And as the next column, we're going to have inflows, outflows, and then the balance. Every time you register a purchase or a sale in the second sheet, Excel is going to automatically adapt those values right here. And then in the next column, we have the reorder alert to tell whether or not you need to restock the items. And in the last two columns, we have minimum stock level, that is the threshold, and the ideal stock level. Let's get started with the list of items that we can have in our stock. However, before we do it, let me click on the first row just to create a header. As we can notice, the entire row is selected. Now I can go to Home tab and change the fill color to a different one. You can use the color that you like the most. However, here I'm going to use a light blue. Now I want to click in cell A1 and I want to give it a name such as inventory, stock, inventory management, reorder, alert. Okay, so you can give many different names. I'm just keep something very simple, straightforward, inventory. Now I want to click again in the cell and I can go to the font size and increase it to make sure it's easier to see. And I can also change the font color to a different type of blue. However, again, as I said, you can use any different color that you like. Now let me click on the second row and then I can change again the fill color. Now in between row number 2 and 3, I can click, hold and drag up to make sure I can make the height a little bit smaller. That way we have a thinner line underneath the header. So this is our header, inventory. That's it. Now we can go and create the table where we are going to manage and register down all the items that we have. So let's say we can start with information such as item name. Let me, in between A and B, click, hold and drag to the right to make sure I can increase the width of this first column. And of course, guys, you can use any product, any item that you actually use in real life. So let me go with something very simple. Item A, item B, item C, item D, item E, and so on. Okay, I can register here many different items, as much as I have. Now let me go to column B, and in this column I want to start with the inflow quantity, outflows quantity, and of course the balance. That is going to be the difference between inflows and outflow. Balance is the current stock level. Let me increase, or let me select column B, C, and D, everything at once, and in between one column and another, I can click, hold and drag to the left or to the right, because that way I can increase the width evenly throughout all those columns. Inflow is when an item is added to the inventory or the stock. Outflows is when an item goes out or exit the stock. And balance is very simple, is the difference. So let's just use a formula here to set up the balance. Equals, sign, and then inflows minus outflows. Enter. That's it. Now let me click on this formula, and in the bottom right corner, I can click, hold and drag down until the last item. Now to set up inflows and outflows, we're going to need to add a new sheet. However, before we create the new sheet to register inflows, outflows, purchases, and sales, let's first set up a couple of more columns to help us with the reorder alert. So I'm going to skip a column. However, let me decrease the width. Okay, just to make sure although those columns are closer together. In the column F, I can have reorder alert, and it's going to indicate if I should or not buy this specific item. However, to make sure the reorder okay, alert works properly, we need to have a couple of more columns, such as a minimum stock level, or it can be the threshold level, basically a column to indicate whether you should or not buy a specific product, reorder, restock. Okay, so let me go with minimum stock level, enter. Let me click in between one column and another, click, hold, and drag to the right. And in the next column, I'm going to have a ideal or optimal stock level. Why is that? Why should I have those two columns? Because the column minimum stock level is going to tell me what is the minimum, the threshold that I can have for each item. So let's say item A. Of course, the balance is 0. However, let's imagine the balance is 50. The minimum stock level is equal to 10. So, of course, I don't need to restock this specific item. Why is that? Because 50 is a number that is larger than 10, or it's above the threshold. And let's say the ideal stock level is going to be equal to 60. Even though we are below the ideal stock level, we are above the minimum stock level, so we are okay. So the reorder alert is equal to nothing, or just a dash, let's say, a minus sign. It indicates that we are good. However, if the balance now is equal to 9 or 8 or 7, let's use 5, the reorder alert is going to indicate that we need to buy this item. So restock needed. And that way we know that we need to purchase more of this specific item. So let's set up this scenario here. Let me go back here in the balance and drag up just to make sure we can copy the formula to all the rows. Okay, and I'm going to let these 3 columns to the right like this, because that way we can recall what we did. Now let's create here a new sheet in Excel. Click in this plus sign, and this plus sign is going to help us to right click, rename. Let's give it a name that it's going to actually match with the function of the sheet that is going to be to register inflows and outflows. So I can just give it a simple name, in and out. Enter. Again, I can create here a header. However, to save time, I can go back to the first sheet and I can select the first, the second row, and then I can copy those informations using the shortcut key Ctrl+C, and then I can paste using Ctrl+V, Ctrl+C. Let me go back now to the second sheet, click in cell A1, Ctrl+V. That's it. Of course, it's not an inventory anymore, but we're going to use this sheet to register all the inflows and outflows, or in other words, purchases and sales. So let me go to the Home tab again. I just want to make the colors a little bit different, so I think I'm going to use red as in the font, and as the background I can fill with a light orange, and this line here underneath I can use a red too. Okay, that's it. Now to make sure we can register inflows and outflows, let me go to row number 5 or 6, doesn't matter, and I'm going to start with the date. The date is very important because this indicates when you did the transaction, the movement in and out. So let's say in January 1st of 2026, I had a movement with the type inflow. So it's indicate that I'm adding a item to the stock. And just to make something this type more visual, we can highlight automatically using conditional formatting. Anytime we have inflow, it's going to be filled with a green color, and anytime we have a outflow, we can use red. So let me go here to the Home tab, and all the way to the right, we can find conditional formatting. We can stick with the first option, highlight cells rules, and then equal to. In this formula bar, I can type the name that I have, that is inflow, and I want to use a green fill, okay? However, if I have here a outflow, I would like to have a red color highlighting the cell. So again, we can go to the same options. However, this time we're going to have outflow with light red fill. Okay, that's it. And as we can see, guys, every time I change the type, inflow or outflow, Excel is going to automatically fill the cell for me. However, I don't want to write every time the same thing, inflow, outflow, inflow, outflow. Something very easy to create here is a list in Excel, a drop-down list. So we can go to data, and to the right again, data validation. We can, instead of use allow any value, we can allow a list. And within the source, we can write those two options that we have. That is, can be either inflow, comma, now we can write the second option, outflow. So either inflow or outflow, and then OK. Now I can select the option, the movement that makes sense. Let me increase the column A width and also the B width. Let's go back to inflow. So January 1st, 2026, I have an inflow of which item. So here we can have item name, and again, we can use a list in Excel. However, to set up this list is very easy. We can go to data, and no, we are not going to manually type all the items that we have, because it's going to take a long time, and we already have the list of items in the first sheet, so we can use that table. So let me go to data validation, and I'll allow a list. However, the source of this list now, I'm going to use the first sheet. Let me click in this up arrow. Now we can go to the first sheet, and I can select all the items. However, if you like, you can select a larger range like this, because the way anytime you add a new item, those new items are also going to be included in the list. So let's make sure our range is very large. Okay, I think it's enough. Make sure Excel does not create here this plus sign, because it's wrong. So let me select everything that I have, delete. Let me go back to the first sheet and select the range again. Okay, that's it. Yeah, now it's perfect. Just a simple range. Down arrow and then OK. Yeah, that's it. If I click in the item name, I can select throughout all the items that I have. Let's start with the item A, because it's the first one that we have, and then we can follow in the previous sheet if everything is okay. Item A, I can have now, of course, quantity. That is going to be very important. We can also have the price, the unit price, the total price, and we can have different information too, such as the brand, the shelf location that this item is going to be stocked, and so on. Let me increase the column D width. Let's say I purchased 50 units of item A with a price of $9.99. So the total price is going to be equal sign unit price times quantity, enter. That's it. We can select both of those last columns with the price and make sure we can go to the Home tab and format as dollar. Or you can use the currency that you need. Now let me select everything here. Go to the Home tab, make sure I can align everything in middle and also in center. Now I can go to insert a table. A table has many benefits in Excel that I'm going to show you. Make sure you select, yes, my table has header, so mark this option and then OK. The first benefit to use a table in Excel is whenever now you need to add new rows of information, let's say January 1st of 2026, it can be the same date or a different date, doesn't matter, enter, as long as it's a new information. Excel is going to copy down the formula and also copy down the lists that we have, and also the conditional formatting, as we can notice right here. So let's say I have an inflow of item A, 50 units, and also I have I sold the item A for $15, 5 units. Yes, that's it. Now if we go back to the first sheet where we have the inventory, so let's make sure we can rename the sheet to inventory or stock. Now we can set up here the formulas to inflows, outflows, and of course reorder alert, minimum stock level, ideal stock level, and so on. Inflows is going to be a equal sign, a sum function. However, we cannot add up all the values that we have because it's wrong. I cannot add up all the values within the table where we register inflows and outflows because I need to separate informations. Item A, item B, item C, inflows, outflows, and so on. So to make sure we can add up values with a criteria, we can use sumifs to add criterion. So double click, 1, 2. Sum range is going to be in the in and out sheet, and we can select the quantity as our range. Let me move this tag maybe here up at the top. So the quantity within the table is going to be my first range. Now let me hit comma. Excel now is going to ask about criteria range number 1 or first criteria range. Our first criteria range can be, let's say, the type. So let me make sure I select the type, comma. As we are within the inflow column, I cannot add up outflow, but only inflows. So let me open quotations, and then I'm going to type the first criteria. That is going to be inflow, close quotations. That's it. Because now every time sumifs formula finds inflows, it's going to add up the quantity value, the corresponding value. Comma. Now let's go to the second criteria range. That can be the item names. Comma. However, here I will not manually type in the name that I have, item A, B, C, D, and so on, because it's going to take a long time. So let's make it dynamic. We can go back to the first sheet and select the first item that we have. And that's it, we're done. Let me hit enter. 50, as we can see. If I bring this formula down, click in the bottom right corner, hold and drag, we can notice we have the formula maybe working, we don't know, so let's make sure we can see if it's working or not. Let me add here now a different date, January 2nd of 2026. I have a inflow of item D, 9 units for the price of $20. Okay, if I go back to the inventory, I can see, yeah, it's properly working. Now, how can I do the outflows? We can basically do the same thing as we did to the inflows. However, the only thing that's going to change is, instead of we use as criterion inflow, we're going to use the word outflows or outflow. Let me make sure we have or not as a plural. No, it's singular, okay? Outflow, inflow. We actually need to have the same name exactly. Let me, within the formula, right, double click, 1, 2. Now I can select everything that I have, and then I can copy with Ctrl C. Now we can press the escape button and go to outflows. In the first cell, 1, 2, I can write Ctrl V, okay? Or right click and then paste. However, the only thing that we are going to change is, instead of use inflow within quotations, we are going to use outflow, enter. In the bottom right corner of the cell, again, we can click, hold, and drag down. Now we can see inflows, outflows, and balance. Everything is working. What we can do now is we can set up here the minimum stock level to indicate if we need to reorder or not. Let me say item A, the minimum stock level is going to be 30. Item B is going to be 10, and then 5, and then 10 again, and 10, and then 20. You can actually manually input those values, okay, because you need to set up those values. And then ideal stock level is the same thing. So let's say 60, 30, 25, 25 again, and 30. Okay, that's it. Reorder alert. How can we set up the reorder alert? Now we are going to use in Excel a formula that is very common, if formula. Because the if formula can use a logical test. So let's say, what can be a logical test? If the balance falls below the minimum stock level, so the reorder alert pop-ups. If not, it's just a dash, and so on. So this is what we can do. Equal sign, if function, double click, the logical test is going to be if the balance is less than. Can we use equal sign? Yes, we can. However, there is a subtle difference. If we use less than, it indicates that one value needs to be below another value. So let's say 9, of course, is below number 10. However, if we have 10 as the balance and 10 as minimum stock level, the reorder alert is not going to activate because 10 is not less than 10. 10 is equal to 10. So if you want to match also the same numbers and consider the same numbers, we can use here the equal sign coupled with the less than sign, okay? That way we can make sure if the balance hit the minimum stock level, it's also going to trigger the reorder alert. Maybe I'm going to use the equal sign. So less than equal to, if the balance is less than or equal to the minimum stock level, comma. So I want to have the alert that is going to be open quotations, reorder needed, close quotations, comma. If not, I just want to keep up with a simple dash. So open quotations, dash, close quotations, close parentheses, and then enter. Now let me bring this formula down and we're done. So, however, let me see something here. Reorder needed for all those other items. Is this correct? Yes, it's correct because look here, the balance is 0. However, the minimum stock level is 10 and 5. And also here for item D, the balance is 9, so reorder needed because the minimum stock level, the threshold, is 10. 9 is below 10, so it's correct. So what we can do now is, let me select everything that we have, and then we can go to Home tab, make sure we align those informations, and then within Insert tab, we can add here a table. Of course, a table in Excel requires all the columns to be coupled together. Because we have here a space, a table is not going to work properly. So what we can do is, we can add a table and then remove this column, or we can just remove right now and then add a table. I think I'm going to do this second option. Let me click in the column E, right click, delete. Now I want to select everything again, insert, table, and then OK. Something very, very interesting and cool that we can do is reorder alert. We can also apply a conditional formatting here, or a automatically highlight. So let's say every time conditional formatting highlight equal to, every time I have a simple dash, it indicates that I don't need to restock the item, so it's equal to green. However, if I have something that is reorder needed, I want to have red color. Yes, that's it. It's perfect. It's working. Now let me do something here. Let's add some item D. I know I have 9. However, let's add a new row, a new inflow. As the same date, I have an inflow to the item D. Only one quantity as the price of 21. Okay. If I go back to the inventory, of course, we still need to buy item D because the balance hit the threshold. So 10 is equal to 10. However, if now I add a new unity, let's say inflow, item D, 1 unit, 21 as the price. Okay, now we don't need to reorder anymore because 11 is greater than 10. So this is how, guys, we can set up a template in Excel that can control and manage the inventory levels, the items that we have, inflows and outflows, and also tell us whenever we should or not reorder the item. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you have any questions or suggestions to next videos, let me know, comment down below, and I see you in the next one.